All right, let's discuss this further now with geopolitical analyst Patrick Henningsen. Good to see you today. Thanks for coming on RT.
Thank you.
The siege of Bani Walid, it actually started because the government wants to arrest the suspected murderers of the man who's thought to have captured Colonel Gaddafi. The town failed to hand them over, but is this siege to you an appropriate response, do you think?
Well, not in a civilized sort of normally formed country, it's not. But as we know, Libya is anything but civilized and formed in a normal organic fashion. The ruling party that you have in Libya right now is an amateur government. It's an artificial creation of the West in the post-Gaddafi regime change plan. So this gives you an indication of how they're governing in this country. And certainly there is no stability in Libya compared to before the NATO bombing and destruction of their country.
All right, Patrick, as you say, it's a very amateur government at the moment, as you said a moment ago, and many would agree with you on that. Now, though, the residents of the besieged Bani Walid town are appealing to the United Nations for help. Good move?
Well, I don't think they're going to get much help from the UN, seeing that the United Nations is the co-architect of this post-Gaddafi Libya. They're half responsible for this sort of the fraud that was imposed via the UN Resolution 1973, which was starting with the no-fly zone, which turned into a bombing zone and a free-for-all for NATO countries. But it doesn't surprise me that the UN will be ineffectual, because I can't see one instance over the whole globe, over the whole geopolitical spectrum worldwide, where the UN has done anything of any value in the last decade or two. They're a complete failure, and they're controlled by their number one funder, which is the United States, and they're sort of mini-me Britain.
All right, now, as you mentioned a moment ago, I just want to come back to this whole point of you referring to the Libyan government as being amateur, because certainly there's a political crisis in the making. The siege ongoing, the government seeming powerless or perhaps misdirected as to how to deal with it. Do you think the country's new political system could be doomed even before it really gets started here?
Well, one thing you can look at really is, with Libya, because the kind of Western imperialist kind of plan with Libya has come after a couple of other so-called successes, which they would count as Afghanistan and Iraq. If you look at the U.S. installed president in Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, he doesn't have any real legitimacy amongst Afghanis, but he's backed by the U.S. and he's a U.S. puppet. In Libya, it's even worse because the West is having trouble with the sort of overt agenda of installing a pro-American and a pro-Western banking sort of leader. So they've got serious problems in Libya. There's no legitimacy really with this post-Gaddafi government. It makes Muammar Gaddafi's government look like a beacon of light and a shining city on the hill.
Patrick, if I can just jump in for a moment, I do apologise. I'm running very low on time here on IT, but you draw up the comparisons, Iraq, Afghanistan, now we're looking at Libya. Let's talk about the next step that everybody is zeroing in on, that of Syria. What's next for Syria? This whole story with Libya and now Syria is directly linked to Libya, because Libya did send al-Qaeda fighters who are being backed by the West in a logistical and financial fashion. But this reminds me of the Spanish Inquisition, Roy, where instead of Rome imposing Catholicism on the Spanish and people who resist, this is like the Freedom and Democracy Inquisition. That's really what we're looking at, especially in terms of Libya and Syria. This is the West going in directly or through its proxies or through its Gulf state petro-monarchies in order to impose a Western-friendly regime in that country that they can then come in and colonize in a financial way. Particularly, we're talking about private banking and public-private initiatives and selling off the assets of the country to pennies on the dollar to Western countries. And that's what the plan was in Libya. They're having trouble because of instability. And in Syria, it could be much worse, because in Syria, we're looking at a protracted civil war now in the making, or something even worse. Well, there are certainly some that are saying, well, there's already been a civil war ongoing for years, and that of Iraq. And here we have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Patrick Henningsen, geopolitical analyst live in London. Many thanks, as always.
Thanks, Roy.